Good morning. My name is Mel Munch, and I'd like to ask you all a question. What if you could buy a home unique from all other homes? This is a completely self-sufficient home, all in one package. A central computer controlling everything, a starting menu plan, small animals, small animal cages, food plan, food menu, wind generators, solar panels, basically everything you need to start a self-sufficient homestead. All in one package. You buy it once and be done. That's what I've been working on for the last 46 years. I call it the Earth Home System. I've written books on it called Planet Earth Home. That the last edition was in 2007. I spent 46 years on the project, and I'm on my second prototype, which we'll be talking about today. I feel that this one single product and the lifestyle that it creates could slow the global warming, global climate change. It could provide a lifetime of fresh, nutritious food, greatly reduce your utility bills, reduce your own carbon footprint, reduce worldwide energy consumption, slow the rate of worldwide freshwater use, reduce global greenhouse gas emissions, boost the renewable energy industry, start many mom and pop green businesses, and steer the corporations and steer green corporations in that area. So we're looking at mass production of a completely self-sufficient home as a product and trying to get that product reproduced everywhere on every continent of the entire world. That's the goal of this project that I set back in 1975, March 3rd. And that goal was to develop the technology to be able to mass produce food and energy independent shelters, be located anywhere on the planet, and be ecologically compatible. Since then, due to the global climate change, I've added high wind resistant to that goal. The website planetearthhome.com gives you a glimpse into it, what I've been up to and what the book is all about. I say global climate change housing research facility. So I'm trying to find a home, kind of a miniature farm that can be put anywhere on the planet and will be able to adapt to climate change. And now I'm not one that deals with climate change all over the world and how to reduce that. I'm looking at more adapting to the climate change at this point, allowing one family at a time to adapt to climate change all over the world. Now the Earth Home System, as I call it, is basically a miniature farm all shrunk down in size to make it super efficient and super small. Picture a huge glass dome over the top of the Earth Home, including the garden space, the animals, everything all contained within a small space. The only thing that comes in is sunlight and wind power and rainwater. Those three things are necessary. At this point on prototype 2, the major input is corn. And we'll get to that a little bit later. This is a chart of what an average family of 4 eats in an entire year. So we're not trying to produce the quantity and the specific foods that a typical family of 4 eats. We all know that the United States eats more than the rest of the world. We're up to what, 90 grams of fat a day, for crying out loud. Well, we're not trying to do that. I'm trying to create a diet that's more like a Mediterranean diet that'll be much more healthy, lower in fat, higher in mostly greens and salads. So I'm trying to create a diet for the Earth Home that's healthier and more sustainable. So we can start off by the structure. Basically, the structure plays a real important part in how this entire system works together. Hurricanes and natural disasters usually wipe out most of the regular structures. the bricks, the stick built. But the structure that remains after a hurricane is usually what's called a post frame or pole barn structure. The word post frame can be called pole barn, it can be called column frame, and that's how the industry has developed into columns. Basically, it starts by putting posts into the ground. That's how it starts. But the posts gradually warp and they moved over to columns, which is laminated 2x6s or 2x8s, and you can make them as long as you want. So basically, a long post put into the ground. At the bottom of the post is usually an uplift anchor. So you put a sideways piece on the bottom. When you put it in the ground on top of a concrete pad to stop it from settling, and you fill it in with dirt, it actually is anchored to the earth. It's like an adhesive. It's like a grip. It's holding on to the ground. So that's called post frame, how strong it is. In a strong wind, it actually moves a little bit rather than snapping and removing. So a post frame is the basis to this entire structure. Now, one of the drawbacks to post frame construction is that you can't put a basement underneath it. That's been one of the drawbacks for many years. The earth home overcomes that by putting a, we'll call it basement, I call it chiller, and we'll explain that a little bit later. So at right angles to the structure, east-west structure, north-south chiller underneath. So it eliminates putting a basement exact underneath it because you can't do it with a pole barn because you need an anchor point for the columns. So I twisted it 90 degrees and put it underneath, and we'll explain that in a minute. So basically, I use north-south chiller, 80 foot long, underneath a post frame building right on top of it. And I use the walls to the chiller to support the beams. So it's a very, very strong and very strong structure that can resist a lot of winds. I go a little farther. In most post frame buildings, remove the bracing before it's completed. They complete it and they take away the bracing. On the earth home, I designed the doors and windows around the bracing. So the bracing is actually included and stays in the structure itself to give it extreme strength. It's called racking strength, back and forth, to resist high wind. So the post frame on top of the chiller is the basis to this structure. The roof plays a very important part on a self-sufficient home for several reasons. Number one, fire resistant. I'm using metal roofing. Asphalt shingles are what's filling up our landfills. It's not recyclable. Most of the world has come around to metal roofing. In Europe, it's very, very strong. One of the early drawbacks of metal roofing is that it sweats. So as the temperature changes, condensation forms on the underside of the metal roof. About 15 years ago, Europe invented a way to eliminate the condensation from underneath the roofing. You can eliminate it. What you can do is absorb it and then give it back day and night. That eliminates the bubble wrap that has to be put underneath aluminum or steel or copper roofing. I use steel because it's completely recyclable. Now you can get this in the United States, and it's mostly used for agricultural buildings because they're using heavier sheeting underneath. The earth home does not use a sheeting. The steel roof, what you look at, is directly over the top of the purlins that run back and forth. So basically, I've also added air movement underneath to remove that moisture. So it's a roofing technique that hasn't been used much in residential, but we're using it here with great success. I'll describe the structure of the earth home by starting from the top down. The most noticeable feature on there is the solar vents. I don't know if you can see my pointer. Oh, not quite. You can see it just a little bit. The solar vents are the top uppermost part of the earth home too. Basically that is a way to collect all the hot air and vent it. No matter which way the wind blows, or if it does not blow at all, it'll still ventilate. The very upper part is clear polycarbonate. That lets in natural sunlight. So that underneath of that, about 6 foot, is actually another layer of glass that allows natural sunlight to permeate all over the living spaces. So the window selection and placement over the entire structure is such that during the daylight, you do not need artificial lighting. Everywhere is natural lighting inside the earth home. The louvers that you see, they're little louvers on the sides, are patterned after Miami-Dade County and also Canada. They have a problem in Canada driving snow. They have a problem in Florida from driving wind from hurricanes, etc. So they've created a shutter system that as the wind and snow and rain drives against the shutter, there's a little catch at the top. It's a bend so that it'll stop the wind-driven snow and water and then allow the air to go through. So the little vents you see as the air, you can actually see through their screening up there. So the air goes in and out depending on the way the wind blows. The very uppermost part is a vent. It's a whole house vent so that I can turn on a fan and draw 2 amps of electricity and completely vent all the hot air through that vent. What you're seeing, those are 2 television antennas and also a cell phone booster. Because this is a metal shell on a building, it's difficult to get a cell phone booster for your TV, etc., etc. So a small booster is necessary. It runs off 12-volt electricity and it comes inside. So there's actually a transmitter inside that transmits signal throughout the house. On either side of this deck is a solar greenhouse. And you'll see those are clear polycarbonate panels that match the profile on either side of the center of the house. So we have an east greenhouse and a west greenhouse. Now you see the white stripes going up and down. In retrospect, I should have used translucent polycarbonate panels instead of clear because it lets in too much light. So translucent would have been a better choice. Right on the southern edge is a black strip of metal roofing. So that is to melt off the snow right near the eave and let it flow down into the rainwater collection systems, which I'll get to in a minute. The house actually is, they call it hipped on the east and west side. So from the center of the house is the living area, and then from the eave here onto the west is called utility area. And you see there's a little bit of the solar vent sticking out over the utility area. So the utility area vents through the end of the solar vent. And then the same thing over there, the garage vents through the end of the solar vents. So both the garage and the utility area is vented separately from the house. Again, whichever way the wind blows, it'll vent. Those small little clips, right about there, if you can see that, there's little snow clips. One of the drawbacks of metal roofing is that snow slides off real easily. That's both a positive and a negative thing. It's positive because it does not hold snow, so you don't have to build quite as strong as you would with an asphalt roof because the snow slips right off. The negative is that people might be standing underneath that snowbank when it slips off the top. So that's why those snow clips are up there, to hold onto the snow and it'll drip off rather than slide off quickly. Looking at the house's section, starting from the west, the utility area and glass, and then the west solar greenhouse, and then the living space is right in the middle, and then the east greenhouse and the garage. That's all under one roof. You'll notice on the west side, the roof is not actually straight. It's actually curved like a pagoda. It actually, we put a little twist in it. That enabled us to gain a whole lot of space over here in the west, because if I'd have continued that slope going down straight, it would only been 3 foot tall on this corner. So I had to twist it a little bit. And the panel stayed straight. It just took a little buckle, and it's been looking very good since. I'd like to talk a minute about rainwater. Many places on the planet use rainwater. Our aquifers are drying up and also becoming polluted. So rainwater is a primary source of water for the earth home system. One of the reasons they use metal roof is that it's so easy to collect rainwater. So the rainwater for drinking, for washing and dishes, etc., comes from the middle section. It's from the utility area here over to the garage area here. All this water comes down from the top in two places. One of them is right here, and one of them is right over there. So the rainwater comes down through the gutters, and that is a diverter, rainwater diverter. It's a common. We'll take a closer look when we get up on the deck, but basically it takes out the larger particles, the sticks, the leaves, and even the smaller particles of the screen, and it shakes it down, and it goes into the greenhouse on the west, and that one goes into the greenhouse on the east. The reason I go into the greenhouses and not the home itself is because of freezing. So I go in, and then it can freeze up, and then when I go into the earth home, that's the part that has to stay warm and prevent from freezing. The deck is over the top of the chiller. We have a north deck and a south deck. This one is uncovered and the other one is screened in. So when I'm walking around, I may use the word north-south or east-west. It's kind of hard to orient yourself inside for the first time. Some people get lost, don't know exactly which way is which. So south faces the sun, faces the open deck, and north will be the screened-in deck and the wind generators on the north side. I'd like to talk about solar for a minute. Between wind and solar is the two power sources for the earth home. These panels are two different type of panels. They've been up for about 10 or 15 years. They're starting to get diminished the power. So when I originally put these two solar panels in, and the wires take the solar panel into the home right here, the controller was like $500. Now the panels have come down in cost and the controllers have come down in cost. So rather than try to match the output and the voltage of these solar panels, I put in a brand new solar bank and a new charge controller. So you can actually add on to your solar panels by using a separate charge controller. The reason that there's such small wires going in is that you series these. So the voltage of these three add together to one set of wires, and the voltage of these three add together. So by raising the voltage, you can drop the wire size. It makes the wire size much smaller so you can go greater distance with it. Makes it very handy. We'll talk about the greenhouses, we call this the west trough system and the east trough system. They're fairly close. We'll go around and talk about it in a minute. All right, let's talk about the garden now. We're in the southwest corner of the earth home and the west trough system. We'll talk a little bit about raising vegetables. This is called the west trough system, and we have a larger east trough system. It's contained within the footprint of the earth home and chiller, so it's very compact. It's called a very intensive overhead trellis system. We started off by making troughs. What they are is raised beds made out of recycled tin. So I make H sections and put 2x6s across either side, and then used recycled roofing steel that was recycled from hail damage, bend them, and then fill them in with dirt. I have two 2 troughs over here, 20 feet long, and on the other side I've got 3, and I'll explain them when I get over there. We've actually added a small little trough system right along the wall to see if we could grow vegetables in even more intensive. So basically, if you walk into this place, the humans have the smaller part of it, and vegetables grow all the way around. You'll see squash hanging from these trellises. So every 2 feet, there's a trellis that goes overhead. So you walk underneath like a tunnel system. Found out that this year we had so much squash, we had to actually brace up these trellises. These trellises are made of cattle fencing. They're very heavy gauge steel, cattle fencing going up and over. So every 2 feet, I have a trellis, and every 2 feet up here, I have a trellis coming over. So it's like 3-dimensional. You're walking into a jungle. And then that leaves the center section of each trough for other vegetables that don't require climbing. The reason I'm concentrating on squash is that squash leaves are very valuable for animal food. Most of what we're growing out here will be for animal food, because in a complete self-sufficient system, animal food is a significant portion of cost. So by developing your own animal food, it really reduces the amount of dependency on society and the transportation system. So the corn that grows right up here are giant Peruvian corn. And we're growing it because of the fodder it provides for the animals. Those are about 10 foot there. I've got a 13 and a 12 foot, 13 foot corn stalk over there with huge stalks. And they're growing in only this much soil. So it's an interesting test. And we get tomatoes and normal vegetables. We concentrate on vegetables that have a high nutritional value and a small space. And what's happening here now, this is the first cutting, and we're actually ready to start the second cutting. So you can actually double crop your vegetables with certain vegetables. Not all, mostly the green leafy vegetables. So we take the squash leaves and dry them out, and then they'll eventually be used in a pellet machine to make pellets for our Muscovy ducks and the cuy. We'll get to that in just a minute. So basically all the foliage will be dried out and used for animal food, most of it. And as far as dehydration, on the uppermost part of the utility area and the uppermost part of the garage is a huge dehydration room. So we spread out these leaves all over the place, and it naturally dehydrates, and then we can use them in the pellet machine. We're looking at the roof of the utility area here, and you'll see the snow guards easily here. That's blocking the snow from coming down to someone on the entry. And then that little device up there, which is for scaffolding, it was used to construct the solar vents. There was no boom truck used in the construction of the earth home. And another very important part, there was no concrete trucks, no cement mixers used on the construction of this entire home. Concrete accounts for some 7% of the global carbon dioxide emissions. So it's very, very destructive to the planet. So we only use concrete pads underneath the columns, and I'll go through that in a minute. So it uses very little concrete in construction of this. That's actually a wood foundation chiller. I call it pre-stressed envelope wood foundation. So basically, I'll go over that method of construction when I get over there. So we're looking at no concrete for floors, underfloor, nothing. The earth home uses what's called a raised floor post beam. So it's like a post beam, just like I talked a minute ago, but the east and west sides are raised floor. So it's a technique used in Australia to keep the floor off the ground, and it makes it much easier to clean, etc., etc. And we'll see the reasons for that when we get on the south side. It actually is for air coming all the way through both east and west sides into the greenhouses and out to the solar vents. It's a big loop, kind of like an envelope home. So in this way, it eliminates any fans or power use in either greenhouses. They're naturally ventilated regardless of the wind direction or speed. And we use rainwater here on the right there. There's another one of those rainwater collection devices right here that actually goes into a tank over here that's used to irrigate this entire, all the plants up here, both inside and outside. That's my irrigation water. And I don't have to filter that quite as much. We'll get to the domestic rainwater filtration system when we get down to the bottom. This is just goes into the tank, and it has an overflow that comes out just in case it gets too hot. That's the overflow right here. In case it's too much rain, it overflows and goes right out in the ground. Now we'll walk inside the utility room. The utility room is on the west side, and it faces the setting sun. I use this for hanging up all my tools that we need for gardening right here. It's an easy place to store them. It's underneath the eaves so that it doesn't get rainwater on them. While we're at the subject of eaves, these soffits and fascias were formed and it eliminated the expense of buying all the trim and the special stuff that they have on the eaves of pole barn. So this was just formed. I used regular steel, painted steel, and formed it on a sheet metal soffit press. It's called a brake. So it was all formed and then fabricated all special for this because there's so much variation in this particular prototype. And I want to use the word prototype because this Earthhome 2 is the second prototype, and it's just a prototype, and it's still in construction. You'll see it while we get inside. It's not a finished model. So I'm going to walk in. This is the entry right here, and because of the tin and the blockage, we're finding that the west side is particularly susceptible to heat gain as the sun starts setting down. And that's when you don't want the heat gain, is when the sun goes down, because it's been trying to cool all day long, and now it gives it the double whammy of especially hot sun hitting on this west side. So that's why this is here. And we're walking up the entry right now, and we use a barbecue grill up here underneath. And we're going to walk in and discuss the utility room, both in terms of the duck and cuy room contained in the corner, and also the irrigation tank and the soil mixing area on this side. And we'll go into that, and we'll take a look up on the top and look at the dehydration room. I just walked into the Earthhome from the west. That's the main entry. Behind me is the door going into the living space of the Earthhome. You notice I'm a little bit higher. This level of the floor space is part of the raised floor that I spoke of a minute ago. So the level of the living space is about 4 or 5 feet above ground level. That enables air to flow underneath behind me into the greenhouse, up through the greenhouse and out. This is called the utility area because it contains the duck and cuy room, and also the irrigation equipment and my soil mixing area. I use ramps just in case. I tried to use ramps and 36-inch doors throughout to make sure it has accessible as much as possible. On top of both these areas is the dehydration area. You might notice there's all kinds of leaves, mostly squash leaves, drying. So it eliminates having to use power to dehydrate because they're naturally vented from the north side, comes in and dehydrates, and then flows out to the solar vent area. On the southwest corner is the water tank that we use to irrigate. We don't filter it very much. We just put it in. The sediment flows to the bottom, and a little ball keeps the hose, the intake hose at top, so it can so the pump can draw the water out to irrigate. So it's kind of used as a buffer. Right now we've had roughly weeks and weeks of dry weather, so I've had to use my shallow well pump to pump into the tank to keep the tank full enough so I can irrigate. The water that I pump from the shallow well is actually recycled. In other words, It's cool. It's about 57 degrees coming out of the shallow well. So I use that water on this side for the to cool off the duck room. I put it through a radiator system before I put it in the tank. So I actually recycle the water before I put it on the plants. So I take the heat out of it and then I put it in the tank for the plants. This side is also used to mix soil. What I say about mixing soil is that soil has to be made. You have to actually feed the plants good ingredients. You have to feed the plants, so you have to have good soil for start off with. So the troughs outside were started with aged horse manure. After it's been aged, that's what started that. And then I mixed in biochar and some other compost as well, so it's easier to mix that. The soil I mix here is for the starting beds, for the seedlings, etc., etc. I use biochar and some perlite, and I have a tool that I use to mix it. It's actually a small garden tiller that I use, and I'll have a shot of it just in a minute. It's very helpful. That small garden tiller, it's a battery operated and rechargeable. It actually fits right on top of the trough. It actually goes on top of all of the east and west troughs, greenhouse, everywhere. So it's small enough so I can actually walk it right down and till the soil inside of these raised beds to eliminate having to do a lot of muscle work. And the raised beds are all above waist level, so you don't have to bend over to pick your plants and to weed, etc. The Earth Home uses a number of tools that are necessary. This one is a little weed whip, and that's used just for maintenance. It's called a Works. It's good enough to where kids can actually use it. It actually adjusts. And this is a little a hedge clipper. So basically, I have to cut the stalks of the squash plants in order to get them into the grinder to grind them up into smaller pieces. And these are indispensable items. I got two items here that are rechargeable. I've got my little tiller, and then we're going to go over other necessary pieces of equipment for the Earth Home to make life much easier and to make it much easier to maintain and to produce your own food. I'm over here now on the southwest corner of the utility room. This is biochar. This is actually discovered down in South America. It's called terra preta. It's the the best soil in the world is considered terra preta. It was found in the Amazon basin. This is actually charcoal, terra preta. It mixes charcoal and ceramics and organic matter. So we're trying to duplicate the terra preta conditions of South America. Over the tank, storage tank, irrigation tank, you can see better about the underside of the metal roof. You see, that's actually felt. If you rub your hand on it, it would feel like a fabric. So this actually absorbs moisture and then gives it back during the day without dripping, without condensation dripping. The piping here are just ways to recycle this water. So I'm trying to use the water as much as possible, trying to conserve water. Very important, because the world definitely needs more drinking water. I think people in foreign countries would be appalled to say that we flush good drinking water down our toilets, but we'll get to that in a minute.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, oh, the tank, I forgot this.
Just take another 3 seconds and
Yep.
put the tank
Yep.
down.
In the Earth Home system, it's beneficial to have compressed air as well. If you produce compressed air directly, which will be from a wind-powered air pumper, it comes in through this tube right here. And I was doing experiments earlier on aerating a fish tank. So we decided to scrap the fish tank idea because of the amount of care necessary to do fish. However, it's still adaptable to growing fish and aerating with a wind pumping wind-powered air pumper, and we'll get to that in a minute. That particular device was made popular for aerating ponds, and it actually just pumps air all the way down this tubing, and I can shut it off, and you can see the tube, see the air pressure going up, but I keep it off. This is actually an air bladder, and this is a backup air pumping 12-volt air pumping, a diaphragm pump. We're on the northwest corner of the utility room right now. It contains the duck and cuy area. So I'm kind of polyculturing them together into this little contained area. So back in Europe, many years ago, they built their homes adjacent to the barn so that the farm animals would be kept close and kept warm, and it would provide warmth to the house. This is a takeoff off that similar system. I'm venting the air from the duck and cuy room up and out to eliminate any odors attached to this. So we're raising them together, and we'll walk in there in just a minute. Here's a couple pieces of equipment that are necessary for the earth home. This is a grinder, a small grinder. It takes, I have to start the generator to start this at present time. This is one of the 2 generators that the earth home has. Yes, we have to use a backup generator. Most self-sufficient home systems that are off-grid do have a generator backup. This one is electric start. It does not have a remote and has not connected, as of all the controls for the earth home has not been developed yet. So I have a generator here, a grinder, and I call this affectionately my maxi blender. Basically, it'll chop up food to use for the ducks and for the cuy. It is an electric lawnmower turned upside down and modified so that I can put in any kind of vegetation, chop it up, and it gives it in smaller sizes for the ducks. So it's a way to chop it up not only after it's been dried, but before it is dried, and give it to the ducks in their food. They'll eat a lot of green vegetation. This is where I store the food for the ducks and the cuy. I'll use the word cuy because it's short for cuy criollo. It's I'll get into that in just a minute. So this is storage for the food. Again, corn. We're now here in the duck and cuy room. We call it that because we're having polyculture. We're raising 2 animals together in a small space. I'll start off with the cuy. Cuy criollo, it's called, is a giant guinea pig from South America. They use them for food for livestock down there. They're related to guinea pigs, but they're much larger, and they cannot be domesticated. These are wild animals. I use this dark fabric so that they won't get scared as much when the ducks come in and start fluttering around. They get scared easily. All I have to do to get them running around is start lifting the cage, and they go ballistic. They cook them down in Peru and Ecuador. They commonly use them for food. They're very good animals because they eat almost everything you throw at them. They'll eat leaves of elm trees, especially Chinese elm. I take the Chinese elm and just put them inside of there. They'll eat any ash tree. They eat almost all vegetation out of the garden, and they just are a wonderful animal. They're raised much like rabbits, and they're bred just like rabbits. They do require vitamin C, so we have to put vitamin C inside their water. I use containers like this because we can feed it from the top, and they have a little ball in there. Each cage contains one. We don't use the ones that fill up because they're a pain. So these can be filled from the top, and you got to put the cork back on to keep the vacuum. So they need vitamin C water, and then they feed pellets just like rabbit pellets, very similar. I don't know if you can see them under there. Oh, I guess not. All right, we'll have to wait for another shot. We give them little privacy places so that they can kind of go in and get away from everybody else. They're kind of spooky. Now we raise them, we put them on the wall. Their droppings go through this 1/2-inch mesh onto the trays. So then it's an easy way to replace, just clean out their pens, to clean out the tray. So they'll eat actually corn stalks also. So I mentioned corn a few times. So we can raise the corn, get the corn and grind it up for the duck food. The second use is the bedding. These are cornstalk bedding. They work very good. And the third use is actually growing vegetables. You can scrape this up and put it up there and grow vegetables. I'll show that in just a minute. These are the nesting boxes for the Muscovy ducks. Muscovy ducks is also native to South America. It's actually a wood duck. It's been very popular amongst homesteaders because they do not make noise. They're quiet, and they have a good demeanor. They don't attack. They don't squawk. They don't do anything. But one thing about Muscovy ducks is that not all Muscovy ducks are created equal. Sometimes you get an ornery one, which you got to put in the freezer. Sometimes you get one that starts to peck out the other ones all the time. So you got to eliminate those from the herd. Now I've got ducks that lay eggs after they're 6 months old. So we get 5 or 6 eggs a day off of these ducks. And then we got 2 that are brooding right now, which means they get into a brooding and they start laying eggs and they start sitting on eggs. So we've actually got small ones now because they were brooding. Let's see if they're still in there. Yeah, she's still in there. Yeah, the first 3 are brooding boxes right here, and the other ones are laying boxes. So they're very useful. The meat tastes a lot like veal or a lot like beef, and the amount of fat on a duck depends on how you feed them. You can feed them a lot of food and get them real fatty, but it's best to feed them just what they need, and they stay very lean and very good meat. It's a very healthy meat. It's very tasty. The fat on a duck is actually used by a lot of chefs throughout the world, and also the eggs from ducks are used for a lot of good chefs use a duck egg because they're rich, they're flavorful, and they use it in pastries. That's kind of a secret to them. So this whole room is self-contained. It'll eventually be completely airtight. I use a fan to keep the air moving out through there, and then the other light hasn't been connected yet. So this water tube goes through the vent pipe all the way out, so I should be able to bring fresh water in even in the middle of winter into this area. Now I don't give them water and food inside here. This is their sleep area. So I've got them trained to come in at night, sleep, and then let them out in the morning. So all the mess is outside. The water and the food is all outside. And then they train to come in at night and sleep at night. One additional item about the Cuys, they don't like it above 80 degrees or so. So I have a radiator, a big truck radiator, that I run the well water through and into the irrigation tank, and then I blow air through that, so it actually keeps this area conditioned during the hot weather. So I've had some really good testing this year for hot weather. It's managed. I keep it below 80 degrees so the Cuys don't get too hot. Even though they're native to South America, they like it below 80. We've had them up to 90 without any problems, but we're trying to keep it low. We're on the very northwest corner of the earth home. We just came out of the door from the duck and Cuy room. The door is used to clean out the duck and Cuy room. I use one wheelbarrow and put it right outside the duck and Cuy room and then scrape it out about once every week to 10 days. Since we've got the little babies now, it's a little more often. It doesn't take too much. I use a long-handled plastic shovel to put it on the wheelbarrow and wheel it up to the hill, and we'll get to that in just a minute. Some of it, I was putting it here until I realized that there's actually a better use for it. So this is actually what we use on the floor of the duck and Cuy room. I could have used concrete there, but we decided to use recycled vinyl flooring. And this is a modified pooper scooper from dogs. I cut off, and so it actually scrapes the vinyl clean before I put down fresh bedding. This is actually a broom I cut off, and I'll show you what it is just for right now. These are water for the ducks. They're made from the cutting out the top of poly tanks. The reason they're rounded is that in the winter time it's so much easier to clean it out. So basically they clean by simply doing this. It's very easy to clean it out, and then simply raise it up, dump it out, wait a second or two, put it back, and fill it back up full of water. This is actually a drinking trough, and this is what we use to give them greens. Again, it can be cleaned out, and just simply raise one up and dump it out. So it's very easy to maintain and clean. While we're here, we're looking at the vents. This is actually the vent that provides air into the utility room and goes up and out, up and out. So this is one way it's vented. The other way, these vents are separate. This vent is actually underneath the raised floor of the living area. This is actually bedroom windows here, and this is the vent. So there's a screen on that. So if you was to look straight down that screen, you'd look all the way into the greenhouse. And this is the north part of the chiller. This plastic was put on there again because of the extreme heat of the sun. In the same way with that sun barrier and the painted surface. I'm trying ways to cut down on the solar gain. Very important, especially late in the evening. I probably don't have enough insulation as I should have because it's a prototype. So I wanted to learn as much as possible. We open up this yard to the ducks because they forage. They're handy because you don't have to just feed them. You can allow them to forage. They're great bug. They eat bugs. They eat flies. Anything. They're just wonderful, wonderful animals that way. Find free food. This is called a maggot bucket. Basically, it's a way to recycle innards from the cuy and the ducks. So the hole's in there for flies. Now it sounds a little rude, but it's a tremendous way to recycle. So I open up the top and then drop in the cleanings, the fish cleanings, whatever you have, drop them in, put the top on. The flies crawl in, lay their eggs, and the maggots drop out through the bottom, right into the animal food. So the ducks just love it when they're dropping out. They actually look up and pick the maggots out when they're dropping out. Maggots are almost 100% protein. It's just amazing protein source. It's a little rude, but for a homesteader who wants to cut down on his food costs, it's an essential part. It doesn't smell either. You keep it out a few feet. It's surprising. It doesn't smell as bad as you think it would. This is a little cage I use for the smaller ducks so that the big ducks don't get to their food. So we've got about 15 or 18 little ducks. Looks like she wants to go back in on the eggs. You'll find that the ducks are brooding right now, and they only come out once a day for food and water. So she's probably going back in to get on her eggs. Go ahead, lady. I spray paint them back. I take yellow fabrics paint to spray them on the back to know which ones are laying eggs and which ones are broody. So I'm going to try to trim down my herd before winter time, trim down the flock. So we're going to clean up a bunch and put them in the freezer. I don't want to be feeding them over winter on corn. I want to be able to concentrate on a summer, on a seasonal pattern. The same thing it goes for the garden, it goes for the ducks and goes for the cuy, kind of a seasonal thing. So you kind of feed them heavy during the summertime, feed them up, fatten them up, and then try to butcher off as many in the fall as possible and put them in the freezer. We'll see my freezer later on. So this is a cover put on over the top of the chiller. The water from the floor, if any of it drains in, goes over this way and drops over to the edge. So this is a way we use if there's a lot of bugs out, or if it's windy, or if it's raining. That's where we socialize. You notice the roof is pretty much the same way, except it kind of tucks right underneath the eave there so that the water can still be collected. And that is a bat house right there. We like to keep a bat house here to keep the mosquitoes down. I use crank-out windows almost exclusively on the earth home. The reason I use crank-out windows, they're also called casement windows, is that they provide almost 100% airflow. If you open them up, it's almost 100% airflow in and out. You don't have to slide them up. You only get half if you slide them up or use other styles of window or a slider. So a casement window is almost throughout except for the bathroom. We're on the north side of the earth home right now, where our power generation equipment is, and a test for the corn, recycled corn stalks. In front of me are a brand new set of solar panels that I recently installed, and are running over this way with all the cords down and into the chiller room. All the wires go. On my right here is another way to recycle corn. It's corn stalks after the ducks have already used it. It's already full of droppings. I brought it up and put it in a pile here, and it turns out the squash do wonderfully right inside of it. So that whole system is going to be expanded in the future to where they're getting corn stalks and putting them in the duck room, and then putting them here. Will be actually manufacturing soil to put on the plant troughs at a later date. This is the first wind generator I have here is a short one. Now, I just wanted to see if I could capture wind at a lower height. This one is about 42 feet. They're both what's called tilt down. This one tilts manually, and we just tilt it back and disconnect some guy wires, tilt it back, and then do maintenance on it. Nobody wants to be climbing high towers or the expensive equipment necessary to tilt it down. This is a 5-bladed model right here, and I tried to get the wind generators that are light in weight to allow them to tilt down without too much difficulty. This is a 5-bladed. I actually moved to a 48-volt system. That sounds a little bit high for a 12-volt house, but in order to get anything over 12 volts requires a higher voltage wind generator, because I had a 12-volt model up there before, and it took a real strong wind before I could even get enough volts, even 7 or 8 volts inside. So I moved to a 48-volt. I also changed to a 5-bladed model. The 3-bladed model will go faster and generate more power. That is given. But a 5-bladed model has 2 advantages over a 3-bladed. The 5-bladed model is less apt to get destroyed. In other words, cause damage because of overspeed. And that's the first one. The second advantage is that it actually produces power in lower winds. So we're going to try to experiment with that. And my wind system is still in development. This is my pride and joy. I started off with a 12-volt AirX, which means it has onboard electronics. So it sends the electricity down large cables. So I had to get very large cables, just like a battery cable. So I had to run all the way over to the house with large cables. It generated electricity, correct, but I was a little concerned about the onboard electronics. Over a period of time, the industry has come around to 3-phase wind generators, which means it generates a higher voltage and it sends it into the house in 3 phases. So it allows this one to use much smaller wire so I can go a longer distance. This one's going to be changed over to a 5-bladed 24-volt model to send the 3-phase power in that way. And 3-phase power has to be rectified, which is a small rectifier, and I'll show you that when we get into get it inside the chiller. There's 2 big advantages to this wind generator. Number one, it tilts down. It's not necessary to shinny all the way to the top of that to do some maintenance or change a wire or whatever. So these cables are arranged and guide in a way where I can crank it down. It's a worm drive winch. So I can slowly crank it down, and it falls right into the little V of these little catches. And then I could, at ground level, I can change it out, and I'll be doing that shortly, changing this one out. The base of this wind generator contains no concrete. Basically, it is an X pattern of recycled telephone poles. So it creates a real well stable base. It uses recycled material. It does not use any concrete. And we guy it to the ground, guy everything down with duckbill anchors. And I'll go over that. I'll show you that in a minute. On my left is the third wind producing machine I have. It is a American Eagle. It's a pump. It is a wind powered air pump. It's not a compressor. It's an air pump. It uses the bladders like a Firestone bladders, like the trucks use for air brakes, etc. So it pumps this bladder back and forth, which then pumps air down the tube, and all the air and the electricity goes down into the chiller that way. It's a 1-lung, single-acting cylinder right now, but in retrospect, I should have used a double or a triple to give me much more air volume, maybe even going a little bit on the blades. It has a big, slow-turning blades on it, so it's not susceptible to high winds. most of the time an air compressor is destroyed, an wind generation device is destroyed because of high winds. There are feathering devices that actually tilt it sideways and whatever. I don't want to rely on those devices. I'd rather just keep it simple and reduce my amount of electricity and air, but keep it safe. That tower does not tilt. It's only not very high, and I can use a ladder to get there, and it actually has a stand so I can work on it. These are called duckbill earth anchors. There's no need to drill concrete or augers or whatever to guide these wind generators down. They're all done with these little devices. Basically, it's a rod, you drill it, you pound them into the ground at an angle until they're very, very deep, and then attach your guys to it. So I use these a lot of places around here to anchor. It anchors my solar panels to the ground to keep them stable, both wind generators and even the air pumper. It stabilizes the tower. Another very handy item to use, FYI, another tool. I use it for most everything. You see it right here guying down this wind block. It is actually rayon banding strap. And what's unique about it, it's very high tensile, and you can actually make as thick and as wide as you want. It's very useful. I buy this by the 3,000 feet roll. It's amazing stuff. Here's a shot of my corn stalks. I find that the square bales work better than the round bale because it's so much easier to strip it off and carry. So I find a farmer that still has a square baler. There's not many of these left, but when he bales it up without the corn cobs and the big heavy stalks, it's much easier to use, and it's very easy. Out there by my round cornstalk baler is what's called a hammer mill. It's an old-fashioned shredder grinder that I can put in corn stalks and make smaller particles out of it. The corn stalks can also make an ingredient inside of the duck food. So I can, inside the pelleted duck food, so that I can use the corn stalks also by shredding it up into small particles and pelletizing. So that's another piece of equipment that's necessary to make your own food. The last piece, and you're not seeing, it's on order from, it's still on the ship somewhere, it is a pellet press. 3mm pellets are what both the cuy eat and the ducks eat. So by having my own pellet press, you can pelletize food on your own and then feed your own food. So you don't have to rely on the feed store or the transportation distribution grid. We're now on the north side of the earth home, and there's some venting going on here. This again is the vent going through. If you can look all the way through, I can point this all the way into the greenhouse. So this air goes into the greenhouse, up and out, and there's actually vents on the underside right here that ventilate the north side here, north side of the earth home. So both sides come together and out the solar vents. This is a vent for the gray water system. So I got 3 different separate waste streams in the earth home. One is the gray water, one is the black water, and one is the urine. And we'll go for that when we get to it. This is the gray water system. Comes out, the gray water is from the shower sinks and one of the kitchen sinks. So it comes right out here, and there's a holding tank here with a pump out, and then it flows over to the settling tank for the drain field, and this vents it. So basically, it's a way to get rid of the gray water, put it right into the soil. It can be reused for irrigation. It's kind of a resource, but I haven't made use of it yet. By the way, all the piping for this is called SDR35, not PVC. SDR35 is a kind of a pipe that gives and takes if the soil moves around a little bit. The PVC will crack and break. They may crack and break, so we use SDR35. It's a little different kind of a pipe. I can show you an example downstairs. These are the north vents into the chiller. This is the main air intake into the entire earth home is through these vents. There's a fans on the other side. I can open up and blow air in, which pressurizes the whole bottom part and allows air to go all the way into the earth home. The plastic is on there because so much solar gain was happening when the sun just cleared the trees. It was heating up the north side of the chiller. This end of the chiller is more submerged underground than any other part. It's going to be used for common food storage, and I'll show you that when we get to it in a minute. Right now I'm standing on the very northeast corner of the earth home, which contains the garage. Items of interest here would be the two intake vents right here. That is for an air-to-air heat exchanger, often called a heat recovery ventilator. And we'll get into that a little bit inside. You bring air in through the bottom and out through the top. So it's a way to get fresh air inside the home. Most homes today are designed to have an HRV installed right away upon construction. So it gives you fresh air and exhausts the old air outside. In the southern climates, they call it energy recovery ventilator because it actually reclaims some of the moisture. It takes some of the moisture out of the air. The white tube is the vent for the sewer system for the black water, and that's the clean out hole. So the holding tank is right down below that, and I have the truck come in once every 3 months and take my black water out. And that's the vent. Actually, that's going up a little higher. That'll go right up to about there. It hasn't been done yet. Again, there's the crank out windows. This one's a stationary window just to give light into the garage. In retrospect, I should put a couple of windows in the garage door. It gives you more light, and I'll show you that when we get inside. Along the east wall, we have, again, intake. These are windows that are not necessary to have crank out so much because it doesn't need as much ventilation. It's just a garage. But we ventilate through here to keep the dehydrator working. Those two tubes one is for the generator on the east side. I use a generator out here. It's another Honda 3000i that I use as a backup generator. The reason it's running right now, I should shut it off. I just got started too late in the day. This is used to take moisture out of the chiller, and it's only used on a sporadic basis. And I'll explain about moisture. Over the period of time testing this earth home, I was concentrating on heat and temperature, and I was kind of neglecting moisture. And I found over a period of time how very important moisture is, and to remove it during the summertime and to add it back a little in the winter. And I've got methods to do that right now. Eventually, this whole earth home will be electronically controlled with a microprocessor. It'll sense the temperature. So basically, it'll work with nature. So I found that I look for a day when my humidistat says it's low humidity, down to 50, 40, 30%, and then the whole house can be opened up and flushed out with dry air. So the house is made to work with nature, not necessarily using power or compression to air condition. Over here also you'll see the entrance to the east troughs, which we'll go through in just a minute. We're on still on the north and east corner. We're going to walk into the garage and take a look at the garage itself, the entry into the home, and actually take a look at the dehydration room before we move around to the entrance to the east trough area in the plants. We're now inside the garage on the northwest corner of the earth home. It's a mess. It's a prototype. These insulations are to insulate underneath the floor. We found that last winter we were losing too much heat through the floor on the east and west side, so that's going to be used for that. These are our toys, and we have a way to get them in here. This is an ATV door here, so we can come in and out with toys, lawnmowers, whatever, and not to bother the two car stalls. Above this is actually a lightweight storage. It's actually for dehydration. So that's why I only use 2x6s up here. It's really lightweight storage. It's not meant for anything heavy, just like any top of any garage. This is the lighting system I use throughout the entire earth home. They are LED light strips. They're 12 volts. This is 15 feet of strips that I had to put inside of a light fixture. They provide plenty of light. Now, sometimes you'll see a double roll, which would be 30 feet. So this one here draws 15 times what? About 12 watts for that much light. They're located all throughout the earth home, and they all use a pull chain to operate. I don't have any wiring, any switches, any of that. It eliminates all the wiring. And I found out that those light switches work best when you pull straight down rather than off to an angle. They're not meant to pull out of an angle. So sometimes they'll have to be sprayed, but I haven't gone to the pull straight down method as of yet. Incidentally, I can light every square inch of the earth home, every square inch. Chiller, all levels, loft, garage, utility area, duct room, with less than 300 watts of electricity total if I turn on every single light. So lighting has been minimized. So that's one of the reasons I went to 12-volt LED strips. It looks a little crude when I put them on there, but again, they're prototype. I'm looking in the future, there might be ones available. Over here is the clamping mechanism I used for the insulation, the ceiling insulation. So basically, I made a laminate to be able to insulate the ceiling. Most ceiling joist and rafter software start out at 5 pounds per square foot. That's their minimum. This here is probably 1 to 2 pounds a square foot. So it's basically polyisocyanate laminate. It's kind of a sandwich. And I got a sample inside. So in order to get them straight and level, I have to clamp them together for about an hour, less than an hour, and then you open them up and they're all sandwiched together. It's a very lightweight, sturdy sandwich, and I'll explain how I did that a little bit there. In retrospect, I should have curved it just a little bit to kind of pre-stress those panels to make sure that they don't sag a little bit. I don't know if they will. I haven't noticed any yet, but it might be good. A clamping fixture is necessary. On the south side, we have windows again and a door going into the east troughs and a door going into the east greenhouse. So it's a way to get in and out of these areas without having to go up and through a house or around the corner. One other thing, I've got a big pile of LP stuff here, propane. Propane, I've learned over a period of time, propane gives off moisture. A lot of people don't know how much moisture it gives off, but it's incredible. So I had to then backpedal a little and take out most of my they call it vent free or indoor, but it actually gives off moisture. I made the mistake of last winter of closing off my vents on the north side, thinking it would hold on to the heat more, but the propane created moisture and it had to be dripped off. For the earth home, it was not a big deal because there's nothing up in the rafter, up in the ceiling area that can absorb moisture. It's all polyiso paneling and wood. So any moisture that gets in up there will quickly evaporate. So it just taught me a lesson to leave the ventilation going all year long. Another thing I want to point out is that this is 10-4 cord. 10-4 cord. 10-4 means 10 size of wire, which is very heavy, and there's 4 conductors. And many times I'll double them to get a double 10 to go places. This is how I wire this entire place, is these very heavy cords. And it's a way to get electricity from my battery bank out to my lights without too much losses. So 10-4 cord is used almost exclusively on this area. That's actually even heavier than that coming up from outside. So that's delivering electricity to my overhead lights over here. Another item that's very, very important for the earth home is PEX tubing. It's just like Tinker Toys. I mean, you clamp it on, it's so fast. It actually revolutionized the plumbing for this earth home. It's been around a while, but I didn't realize how valuable it was. Is PEX tubing. I use mostly 1/2 inch all over. I found out that if I'm going to go great distance, I got to go with 3/4 PEX and then neck it down. There's some couple examples of my lights you can see there, and those are my water pumps. I've gone through a lot of water pumps trying to find the right water pump for this place. There's two water pumps that jump out. One is North Star and one is Seaflow. They both deliver about 5 gallons a minute, and they run continuously. One of the problems with a lot of 12-volt equipment is they're not designed around continuous operation. They'll burn out, or a lot of RV pumps or pressure pumps or whatever. It's just not designed. This whole home runs on 12-volt electricity, and the pumps are actually critical. So I've got pumps in several places. I've got it to pump the rainwater, I've got it on the well, and I've got it on my irrigation system. All the same kind of pumps. They're very robust. Most of this is all for storage. I need a lot of equipment and materials when I work on the earth home, so it's basically inside of a lab. Now we're walking out to the east troughs, and when we're finished up with there, we'll take a quick look inside, and then we'll go down into the chiller. We're standing now in the east troughs. We put up a fence around here with 2x4-inch mesh to keep the rabbits and the deer out of here. There's a saying among farmers that you plant, a third of it goes to animals, and a third of it goes to insects, and the other third is for the farmer. So it's necessary to protect it both from the insects and the animals. What we're looking at in front is the 2-year plants. What that means is some plants need 2 years to make seeds, and these are in the second year now. So basically, all of the plants here are what's called open pollinated. They're non-hybrid, open pollinated, most of them heirloom seeds. So you cannot save a seed from a hybrid plant and get an exact duplicate of what it was. You got to use open pollinated. Over the years, I found a lot more companies selling open pollinated seeds. So we're starting to collect these seeds here for later use. Again, this is the second year. We raised them inside the earth home all over the winter, and they did just fine in the window. What we're looking at is more of the trellis system. You can see the squash hanging from the vines and the huge broccoli and all different kinds of open pollinated plants, mostly raised for the animals, I said before. And we can show the corn here. Some of those smaller ones are popcorn, and there is some yellow corn here. Basically, I waited to plant the corn because the farm next door alternates corn and soybeans, so I didn't want to grow corn for seed in the same year that he planted because they'll cross-pollinate and the seeds will be weird. So here you have tomatoes and about everything else. It shows a little bit about the watering system. They're under soil watering system. There's an example there. They're actually under soil. So when I turn on the plant watering system, it's automated timers that puts water right on top of the soil to eliminate evaporation. We'll show you that when we walk inside just a minute. So I do have one set up on top. When I had a pond out there, I was taking water right out of the pond and watering, but now we got no pond. We're in our, 8th week of drought here, so that pond is completely dry. I could pump out of the other one, but I decided just to conserve and use the undersoil system this year. This is an example of the undersoil irrigation system. This tubing is made of recycled rubber, contains tiny pores. So if I pressurize this, it'll kind of sweat and drip. That's what all of this has, is these tubes. Now the reason I have 2 long troughs and this one here, a separate shorter one, is that this one is for root crops. We found out over a period of time that root crops do not like to grow inside the greenhouse, and they do not like to grow in a high nitrogen soil. They like loose soil, less nitrogen. So I've created this trough for our root crops. I got carrots especially, because carrots keep so well. I'm standing on comfrey. Comfrey is very important for the self-sufficient home because it's 25% 25% protein by dry matter. So I'm working on ways to harvest this, mix in this high protein dry matter with the squash leaves and the vegetable leaves and pelletize. I'm looking at ways to duplicate this faster. It grows incredibly fast. This is actually my 3rd cutting this year. And it propagates by cutting away the roots. You can make new ones. That way you can't do it from seeds. You got to propagate from a root. This one here is not a regular comfrey. It's called Bocking 14. So it's a Russian version, which is higher protein and better for animals. We tried growing corn along the edge. We just didn't get enough rain this year to make it worthwhile. And then these are more of these very huge kale plants that actually grow huge leaves, but they didn't do real well. You can see the squash hanging from the trellises. It's incredible, kind of shocking in a way, how much weight can hang from those trellises and how those squash plants can support those squash. But I think we only had one drop off this year, and that was by accident. They stay put. I've had squash probably, I don't know, 15 or 20 pounds hanging there. They seem to develop a strength as they start hanging. So we got various kinds of squash hanging on the trellis out here. And this is the door that goes out of this area down to the chiller. We're standing here inside of the earth home on the very southern part of the living area. This little solar room, we call it, juts out from the earth home because I wanted access to the sunlight over here. And we have 2 windows going into each solar room. I'm bringing in the rainwater through here. So the part that can freeze is outside. This has to stay thawed out. So rainwater comes in, and this is called a first flush system. So it's meant to take out the first wash, dust, debris, whatever's on the roof. It actually filters it out, and then a ball fills up at the top and it blocks it after it's filled up full of dirty water. And then after the rainwater event is over with, the ball starts going down. It actually drains out through there, goes outside. After the first flush is done, it comes over here and goes into my primary filter here. It can be turned on and off. Goes into the primary filter, and then there's an overflow that takes it out again if there's any event. And it goes over and down into the chiller. This is a custom designed filter system. It has filter socks inside, so they are cleanable. So the dirty rainwater comes in here and goes down into the filter socks and goes down into the tank down below. So these you can take them out, put them in a washing machine and wash them and put them back in there. So there's plenty of filter area inside of there. And this keeps it sealed up. You can actually hear the rainwater trickle in once in a while when it's a rainwater event. So I have one on this side, one on the west side, one on the east side, and it goes down into the water tank below. These are the plants. We're getting ready for the second crop. So we plant certain plants that grow fast, and it's meant for fall planting. So people don't realize you can actually get 2 crops out of your garden, just in the spring and then the slow maturing items in the spring, and then you can grow much more foliage by planting in the fall as well. These are getting ready to go into the troughs. We use small watering systems, spray water, and these are good for putting mist, keeping them moist. Little rechargeable misting machine. It would also be used for pest control. This is a 12 volt, excuse me. This is a LP. I don't use it much because it puts moisture in, as I explained a while back. And this is RV heaters. So basically this takes the good heat and puts it inside, exhausts to the greenhouse. So all the CO2, carbon monoxide that it uses in combustion goes into the greenhouse, and actually that's what the plants need to grow. So it's a good system back and forth. This is measuring the pressure inside of the house. So basically I want to try to maintain a positive pressure. So I got 2 different ways to measure pressure. So it's especially good for testing in the wintertime when we get running the wood stove and you're putting a negative pressure. So you got to bring in positive air. So we're bringing in positive air for the wood stove at the same time. One of the big thing about the earth home in the summertime is that it recirculates air from the chiller all the way up here. So what you're hearing is the small fans running in these little boxes. There's 4 of them that actually bring up air from underfloor and circulate it up here, and then the air is replenished back, so it's recirculating all the time. So basically the temperature up here tries to stay the same temperature as what's under the floor and around the chiller, which is like a double wall. So I'm using the wall space in what would be a typical basement wall space and under the floor, using all that coolness to recirculate in here. Now, what you're looking at in here is a floor plan. Now, it took me about 17 tries to get the floor plan just right. Floor plan is where the rooms are located. Some people use an open floor plan, a big loft area, and I decided to go with privacy rooms instead. So I have a bedroom in the north and west corner, and I have a bedroom in the north and east corner, and then one up in the loft. And the privacy rooms and bedrooms are at the far side, and then the kitchen is at the very central part of the home, because that's where most of the activity goes on. And then back in the corner is an office, all naturally lit. I got windows high on the wall to naturally light this. There's a kitchen light is on. It gets a little bit dark when the sun is down. I can actually turn it off. Here's a light on this one too. You can see it doesn't do much because most of the natural light is on. One thing I've come up with is turn on and off. This is a banding strap, a little silicone and a little spring loaded. So you turn it on, it snaps it back, and it turns off and on the lights easy enough. There's all these located. It eliminates having to use a switch and the electrical cords, and actually it's easier to change as well. This is a example I was going to show you earlier. This is that porous recycled rubber tubing that goes under the soil to water the plants. And we'll take a look inside of east and west greenhouses briefly and show you the watering system inside of each one, as well as the outside of the rainwater system to show you the part that can freeze. That's why there's not a whole lot of rainwater systems in Canada, because of the cold weather. So if you can keep it warm and keep the water from freezing, you can use rainwater. That's why most of it is in warm countries, tropical countries, Greece, Hawaii, Virgin Islands, places like that. But it's used extensively, and it's a very good source of water. We're standing on the south deck. This shows you the width of the chiller. This is right on top of the chiller. This is recycled cedar decking. You see the little lines? That's where the old boards were. So if you flip it over, you see what the decking looked like, but just before they replaced it. So we're actually using it twice. We flipped it over and we're using the other side of them. Over here are some of the garden tools that are necessary. They're all short-handled. Most of the garden tools are long-handled. People don't want to be bending over, so it's easy to use some of these tools. It's been modified so you can actually weed and cultivate. A lot of these tools are necessary back when they were smaller. And then these are the transplant tools we use to transplant. So when we planted, you have to weed and you start getting bigger, then we can move them around as necessary. So you can actually gain a lot of efficiency by moving plants around. This shows you close-up shots of the rainwater system, how it works. They've got little fingers in there that take a big debris, and then a screen that vibrates. It goes up and down like that, and it chases most of the bad stuff off.
Show that again, would you?
There's a little fingers that fit in here, and then this vibrates up and down and kicks off a lot of small stuff. As the rainwater comes, it vibrates and takes off all this debris, so it doesn't make it down into the rainwater system. This is our solar shower system. Between the early summer and later on the fall, we actually shower outside to save hot water and to save water going into the gray water system. I use two of these little camping showers, one hot and one cold, and then we can fill them up from the hose here. When it heats up in the sun, you'd be amazed at how hot the water gets. So I can adjust them. It goes down, and I put a shower stall there, and then we take a shower outside, and then underneath it goes right into the ground. Eventually we're going to put a worm bed under there so that worms can be fed from the shower water, and the soap and stuff can be fed that way. So this is what we use on the deck when the sun is out and it's nice. If it gets windy or inclement weather, we go to the north side underneath the screened-in porch. We're standing inside of the bathroom of the Earth Home. There's 3 different plumbing systems I want to talk about. The Earth Home does not use a one-stop shop for all the waste. want to separate the waste streams. This is the shower head, and then this is the way we collect all the hair. It's an easy recyclable, so the hair doesn't get caught anywhere in the plumbing. It eliminates a lot of plumbing issues. Again, that's gray water, and this is also gray water. This sink is specially designed so that you just touch the button and the water flows. Kids as young as 4 years old can wash their hands. We use a little stool and the kids lean up against it and wash their hands. So it's an easy way. It uses very, very small amounts of water. It uses like, a small ounces rather than cups full of water. You can wash your hands on a cup of water easily. And I use all hip pull valves for plumbing. A hip pull valve replaces typical U-shaped plumbing where it's a trap. The water stops the vapor. This is called a hip pull. So basically it can freeze solid. It doesn't matter. You don't have to drain it. Hip pull, and there's an air admittance valve in here too. So it's a specialty plumbing that you can freeze over the whole earth home and it won't be affected. It uses what's called a duckbill valve, which is very similar to this, so that water can flow through, but the smells cannot go through. So I use these in several places. I use them in the urinal. I have 2 urinals to collect urine separately. So this is a female urinal and a male urinal. They use a funnel to go down, and then a ball valve stops the odor from coming back. So it's used for urine collection. And this is a urinal also. The ball stays in there. It floats around in there, and to clean it only requires a little bit of a spray, and we'll go over that in just a second. So we're collecting urine separately, and then gray water separately, and then the black water system is a different system. So we keep the black water separately. The reason we do that is to really reduce the amount of waste that's coming out of the home. This is the HRV valve. So when you're done showering and it's all steamy in here, just turn this on. It's a timer. So then the HRV takes all the moist air and takes it outside and brings in fresh air into the kitchen and into the living area. It goes right out through here. So all the moisture goes out. It's a way to vent, but we don't vent directly out. We vent directly through the HRV and exchange the heat from in and out. This is the way the heat gets in through here. This is a typical vent system. I use a dual muffin fans, 230 millimeter muffin fans. They just sip electricity, last a long time, and by V'ing them, at them 2 at a time, you can just feel the air coming in. This is air that's been recirculated under the floor of the chiller and comes in nice and cool. Okay, let's go look at, you see the toilet from there? Mm-hmm. Okay. This is a spray bidet system. So most of the world use water for personal hygiene. The United States and England are one of the few countries. In Venezuela, for example, 80% of the people got bidets in their house. They consider it normal. So basically, this is a handheld sprayer. So this is a RV toilet. It has a ball rotating. So basically, to use it, give a little spray to lube it up, do your business, and then drop it through. And if you got a spray, it's a way to keep it nice and clean. Now, if you're concerned about odors, this is a vent fan that opens up the vent. So you can turn on the fan, you can hear it go on, and then open this up, you can hear the air go down. So the air is going down, it's not coming up here, you can't smell anything. This bidet sprayer doubles as a urine clean out. You can clean out the sink, you can clean out the other urinal, and you can do your bathroom all at the same time. It's a sprayer that has kind of a fan-shaped, it's pretty powerful. It's the same tip that I use on my portable bidets. This thing swivels and a simple push button. So it's a way to keep the bathroom clean and for personal hygiene at the same time. And I put it right here. Now the bathroom toilet paper, it cuts down on use because this is a gravity. In other words, it's friction. So when you pull it out, it stops. It's a little bit of a foam pad, a square foam pad that goes on. So you can't freewheel it. So kids can't come in and get 12 feet of toilet paper or 100 feet, whatever. So you just take a small amount. So basically, after the bidet wash, you just use a small amount of toilet paper, just a pat check, and just put it right in here, and right in the trash. So it cuts way back on your toilet paper use, and at the same time keeps you cleaner, and it's actually better hygiene. The world is using bidets, except for the United States. So it turns out the United States isn't using the correct techniques in that would be more beneficial to human health, but I think some of us already knew that. Right now we're standing in the west greenhouse, and I can actually feel the air coming from underneath the raised floor coming this way, and you can feel the air going right on up out underneath the ceiling. So it's a big loop that continuously works without using any power. We have 3 troughs up here, similar to the larger troughs outside, but they're actually raised up. I was trying to go for more sun exposure. Right now, some of the troughs are empty, getting ready for our next crop. That's out there. We're ready to double crop it. Little stairway goes up, and then you can look underneath the ceiling and see what it looks like underneath the ceiling. Right now we're standing in the west greenhouse again. This is the rainwater system, the overflow, and then the first flush goes right on out into the tank. This is the bad water, and it can freeze up. You see the pipe coming in from the filter, from the diverter outside, coming inside. This part can freeze up. That's why it's out here. I have here, this is called a broad fork, and it's been modified to go inside the troughs. So I can just climb up on top of each trough and broad fork it. And the reason this broad fork it happens is that I can stir up the soil without killing any earthworms, etc. So it's one way to stir the soil, the broad fork. Another way is the little garden tiller. This shows the watering system. Each trough is watered individually with the same recycled rubber hose on top of each one. We also have a manual wand. We can turn it on and water manually. So it's a way to put water on the soil without spraying it all over. And you notice on the ceiling, that's how I blocked some of the sunlight. Those clear panels, I painted over them, striped them down to cut back on the amount of solar gain in here. I think the highest we've ever seen is like 96 degrees inside of here. There's so much air moving through that it's not required to have any kind of air movement or open up any windows of any kind. And we're still standing in the west greenhouse. Down below me, or is where the air comes into the greenhouse underneath the house, and it comes in, and you can just feel the air movement as it heats up. It goes up and it goes out underneath the tin, and it's actually, that space is considered an attic space, and you can see the cross bracing, and they're called LVLs. Those large beams or LVLs are 24 inches and 1 3/4 inch thick, and I reinforced them with a 2x4 on the top and bottom. That gives it a bigger target to screw into for screwing into, etc., and also adds strength. So these span all the way up to the top of the solar vents, and then it's crisscrossed at the top and bolted in, so it actually is super strong. And that's a way I can naturally ventilate the greenhouse on both sides. We're now in the east greenhouse. It's set up a little different than the west in that we're on the ground level, and get a good shot of the watering system again. These are the automatic timers. They work on batteries. They work very well. You set the time, start time, how much, and it actually goes right into the undersoil and waters them. We found over a period of time that this works better for foliage and not root crops. But we found out that cucumbers seem to do good inside. We're experimenting with those on the trellis system going up. So we have this trough and that trough. Again, the venting from underneath goes up and out through the top. Originally, this was designed to have plants right on the wall. They're big panels that open up. They actually swing open, can open right up. Both east and west side, they actually swing open. We haven't had a use for it yet, but it's there in case we do need it. This one is easier to heat in the winter. We keep these plants live until about November. We plant mostly leafy greens, dark green leafy greens, which is probably the best green for the human body, the dark green ones. They got the higher levels of vitamins and protein content. You see that's where we put a small roof over the top over here, and then we block most of that air so that we can keep this space a little warmer. We might completely block that off and just to keep a smaller space, just to see how long we can keep vegetables alive in this east greenhouse. This is an example of a filter, and I'll show you more. It's called a spin down filter. These three go in. Basically what it is, it's a 2-inch. I've experimented with so many different kinds of water filters that finally we arrive on this one. You just turn the valve, and that cleans out the filter. It spins around. You can see the particles going around. So it actually cleans it out. So you don't have to replace them all the time. It's called spin down. And if you want to clean this out, this thing called oxalic acid, or what's called wood bleach. You can actually soak it in wood bleach for 5 or 10 minutes. It takes all the rust off of it, and you can then rinse it in water and put it back in. So it's a recyclable filter, one of the few that's very good on the market today. And this is going to be used because I'm pumping from the other side up to 1/2 inch. It was kind of losing a little pressure. I couldn't get the pressure I wanted on my irrigation system. So I went to 3/4 inch, and we're going to run direct. It's a 3/4 inch line running direct right out to my watering system. So it keeps the pressure very well. I can, from a 5-gallon pump out there, 5 gallon a minute, I can get over 3 gallons a minute at the sprinkler head. So it makes it a lot easier to keep that pressure up. So this is the back end of a RV furnace. It's a 12-volt furnace. So basically it actually works on a thermostat, so I can turn it on and off. And this takes air in and it exhausts air. So this air that comes out contains carbon dioxide and exhaust, and which is very beneficial to these plants. The plants use carbon dioxide and gives off oxygen. So by providing an exhaust into this room, it's actually beneficial to the plants, and it does not hurt the air quality inside the earth home. Up there you can see the natural lighting, the two different windows. One of them goes into Claudia's office in that side so that the light goes into her office, and the ones on this side are for the top of the loft. So it allows natural light into that loft area as well. I've experimented a little bit with mechanical bug control, different kinds. Basically, this is a vacuum cleaner, and it's a vacuum cleaner that collects bugs. So I use it to suck up bugs. So this one here is a higher powered model. It's a chemo, and it's about 200 CFM, and I put the bugs right inside of here. So outside, I'll see bugs flying around, so I'll just turn around. And the bugs go into the intake, and the screen prevents any plants and stuff from larger leaves from going in, puts them into the bag, and then they just put it aside, bend it over, put it aside, and they die. So it's a way to collect insects without using chemicals. So that's what one thing I'm experimenting with. We're standing right in about the center of the earth home. Out there is a solar room. Some of our activities taking place. You can see this is all naturally lit except for the kitchen. And I can turn this off to show you. It's a little bit dark in there because the light, I'm working on insulation and bubble wrap up there, so it's a little bit dark, but it's still usable. But it doesn't draw very much power. It's about the only place inside the earth home where you need some little bit of additional light. Right here we have our wood stove, brings in outside air, and the stack goes right up to the ceiling. And then there's the small lights. Again, they just sip the power. These are LED strips, 12-volt LED strips. There's an example. Again, the vents coming out both sides, and the vents come out both sides here and goes into the room. That vent goes into the bathroom. That vent goes into the bedroom. This is a 12-volt refrigerator. The problem with it, it's a nice refrigerator, but it builds up a little too much moisture inside of it. So we're replacing it with that unique refrigerator with a refrigerator-freezer combination. We haven't got to replacing them out yet. As you can see, we have 12 volts. It's a big screen TV, speakers. It works fine. We get Netflix and whatever inside, providing we have our booster working. The kitchen is located centrally, and we have 2 wash basins, one for dirty water and one for gray water. And they also have a similar push button wash system. You can rinse your dishes off just by pushing a button and spraying. This is a centrally located water system. Now, water is central to our entire planet, and it should be central to our bodies as well. So I've added a water system here to allow kids to take a drink of water directly and then put it right back on. They can reach it down here, they can reach it up here, little push button. I haven't tested the water yet. I'm going to wait until I run a few more waters through, and I'll show you the filter system down below. And this one's for your tea. Do you want to run some tea or water, tea or cocoa, whatever? This is just temporary. What I'm working on is some way to prevent kids from putting their mouth over the top of it. So in a regular drinking fountain situation, you waste a whole lot of water. This is a way where you can just spray it inside and you won't waste it, won't waste a drop once you learn how to use it. So it's centrally located. It kind of reminds you to drink water all the time. This is called a Berkey filter system. It's a silver impregnated ceramic. It's filters, a gravity system. That's what we use right now until we come online with this, because this actually uses some of these, and I'll show you downstairs. It's a 5 filter. This one uses gravity and it comes through really slow, but it's really good quality. British Birkfeld, they call them Little Berkey or Big Berkey. And then this will be pressurized silver impregnated ceramic. I use a dual one to make sure I got plenty of capacity. Upstairs you see the loft system. Basically it's a second level. It gains a whole lot of floor space with just a little increase in ceiling height. We use a 412 pitch all the way up, which is the minimum for full building, to allow the water, ice and water to slide off. Eventually that bedroom is going to go out with windows to make it much more, so you can open up the windows and it'll be much better view and add a little bit of natural sunlight. So that's going out. That's a half bath, very similar to this one. Male-female urinal and the camping toilet, the RV, the ball valve. And it has natural light from above as well. And then place for kids, an extra bed up there. And the kids all play out here. It's kind of a big playroom. Adults have about hit their heads. Kids can run around in there without hitting their heads, but adults stop right about there. It gets a little slow in the ceiling height. On the other side is where I use my hobbies. I sell things online, manufacture a cigar roller and a porta-bidet. It's a portable spray bidet bottle. So I manufacture those and build them to order. So that's my hobby room, and Claudia has her hobby room here in her office. This is unique, this stairway, a point of interest. A lot of people have high ceilings, but it's difficult to paint or hang a picture or do something with high ceilings. This entire stairway actually moves. You can actually bring it back and then access the ceiling any place in here, except it wasn't for this. You can access a couple bolts, come loose, it comes back. It can actually go right over the top of this to access the entire ceiling. So it's a way to access the whole ceiling with this unit. That's the entrance down to the chiller is right there. And then I can close it up if I want to. I'm still doing an experiment with air movement. Over here is my shop and another gravity LP furnace. Again, gravity because the fan takes a lot of energy. It's nice to use gravity as much as possible. So it's a gravity furnace, and that's my shop. So I got to kind of work with my shop. You'd be surprised how often during the daytime I need a tool. Speaking of tools, there's 3 tools over here that are so important, so indispensable. One of them is a temperature gun. So I can look around and measure the temperature of walls and spaces and ceiling just by a touch of a button. So it's so important. It really added a lot. I understood how the airflow and how the heat went. And this is a cordless cutter and grinder and impact. You'd be surprised how much building I did on the Earthome before I discovered this little boy. That's my right arm right there. It's about 70 or 80% of everything I do involves these 2 tools. It's very important. Just again, storage. And this goes out where we first come in, we'll go down into the entryway and out through the west. You'll see a lot of temperature monitors and thermostats located everywhere. I try to keep track of the temperature everywhere all the time. This is a small section of the ceiling panels. These are polyiso panels, they're foil covered, and in the middle, to span a distance, I use 3/4 inch regular high density foam. And when I clamp them together, I use polyurethane foam, another very important thing I use up here. So I use polyurethane foam, clamp them together, excuse me. And then each one of these panels are 4x8, held together with just a screw on either side. So it's a very lightweight, a high insulated value. Those little fiberglass pieces sticking out are what I call the seal. So before I put the panels up, I stuck a little fiberglass in here and let it hang out. So when the one panel goes up against the other panel, it actually will seal this space and gives you a little more leeway on where you want to put your panels. I haven't finished off this roof yet because I just had other priorities. In retrospect, I should have used three layers, 1, 2, and added another layer, which will be closer to what a normal home is. So that's what we're discovering now. I should have used 3 layers instead of 2. But very good, very sturdy insulation. And then you can see the natural light coming through here as well. So very seldom do I have to turn on a light anywhere in here. Right now we're in the very southernmost part of the chiller. This room sticks out from the house about 20 feet. So inside this area is a lot of storage. And what in particular I want to call attention to is these 2 large containers for urine collection containers. Each one collects urine, and I can turn from one to the next and have a clean out tube. So most people don't realize that urine contains about 80% of all the good nutrients and vitamins that goes into the body comes out in the urine, about 80%. It's not in the feces. People think that's the important part, but it's not. It's the urine. So once you collect enough urine and store it for about 4 months or so, 3 to 4 months, it actually changes into an ammonia, more of an ammonia. And that's what farmers buy to put on their fields. If you go by and you smell that ammonia field and see a farmer looks like a spray or whatever, ammonia, that's what they're spraying on their farmers' fields. So this is going to be used for undersoil fertilization. And this is a macerator pump. When urine gets stored, it forms little crystals and it's kind of abrasive to a pump. So you have to use a macerator pump to pump it out into a storage tank or mix it with water and then put it under soil. Can be used a lot of different places yet. So this one's got a few months on it yet, and this one's just fresh. So this is called an air admittance valve. So it lets air in but does not let it air out. It's a way to vent it. The urine does not need venting by itself because it doesn't generate any gases or anything. It doesn't ferment. You want to keep this urine as clean as possible. You don't want any soap in there, extra water, any toilet paper, none of that. Just keep it clean, just like a regular urinal will. And for toilet paper, you just put it in the trash. This is a brace used to brace the walls apart. Now, when I made this earth home, it's pea gravel underneath. There's no concrete. It's pea gravel, and then a base footing with 2x12s were built up out of lumber, and then the walls are erected on top of it. And then when I put the floor on, I put plastic over the top of the pea gravel and put little areas where the water would go out if it rained on it, because it was built over many years, so I knew I would get rain. So what I have is called pre-stressed wood foundation. So basically, before the ceiling was on, which is the floor of the deck, I put these walls slightly at an outward angle, and then put my braces on, my 45-degree braces on, and then winched them back tight from both ways. So put stress on them, and then put the ceiling on and bolted it down into place. These bands go up just like they are, over to the edge of that plate and then up, and it's nailed from the outside. So in order for this wall to move inwards, it would have to pull this whole wall and pull this whole piece, which is virtually impossible. So this floor joist, which is a ceiling joist here, connects directly with the wall joist, connects directly with the floor joist. So there's this little air cavity goes down, and it actually goes right around. There's nothing holding it there. In the corner is little angle irons to hold the floor up right in the corner, so that you can put weight on right out to the corner, but it actually connects. So there's actually a dead air space all around us right now. These little holes intake air. So when I exhaust air from the floor, and we'll see that in a minute, bring air out, it creates a negative pressure inside. So the air from the room goes in here and slowly goes down and into the underfloor space, and then back up. It's a way to slowly move the air so it picks up all the coolness, loses a lot of its heat, and is used to recycle air inside the whole building. There's some tubes coming out on the floor that used to be a design where I was going to recirculate water through the soil to aid in the cooling. It still is on the drawing board. I haven't found an excavator or a well driller. They're all busy doing their other things, so that has to go on the back burner right now. Over here is all my fans. Over the years, I've used an incredible number of fans of different kinds and sorts, high-powered, low-powered, small, vent fans, duct fans, you name it. But the two fans I arrived at, which is this one here, it's a very nice size motor. It's for venting an RV. It's an RV exhaust vent. There's a lot of them being made. And the advantage of this one, it moves high amounts of air with only 2 amps. And this has actually found a speed reducer to really slow it down to 1 or even a half amp. So I can use this large one for a lot of uses. That's what you hear behind us is one of these. And the other one is a computer fan, muffin fan. I use the Spectre Pro 230 millimeters. So basically, it is a computer fan that it has very good air bearings, lasts a long time, and just sips the electricity, and packaged well. This is the fan. They've actually specially designed these little fan blades. It just sips the electricity, and it lasts a long time and is very quiet. I use 2 of these at an angle if I want to push air down a duct. So it's a way to use 2 of them and increase the volume going down a duct. Almost every place on this earth home, I use 2 of these inside the duct to push air around. This is my right arm around here. That's that foam I referred to. So I can cut foam, glue them down with this, and in a matter of minutes, I can test duct work, I can test plenums, you name it, with this. Very, very important to the earth home. And I keep my plumbing down here too. I keep plumbing down, so I change out plumbing quite a bit. I use humidistats. This particular vent fan draws air from underneath and vents it out. So I can actually turn on that fan and actually flush out all the air from underneath. If it gets to be a really low humidity day, I bring in air through there, goes under the floor, and goes out. So it's a way I can flush it all out. So this whole chiller has a potential to be completely airtight. I used to have HEPA filters located in those vents outside, so I can actually keep the air quality in here HEPA quality. Okay, now we're gonna move here into the main part of the earth home. That'd be what's under the main living area before we go on to the north, which is under the north deck. Okay, I'm walking from the south chiller into the main part underneath the living spaces. Directly above us is where the solar room and my computer is, and walking over toward the kitchen itself. So the floor of this, the ceiling of this acts as a floor of the next level. This is rainwater storage. I have right now 300 gallons I keep inside of here, right down about here. I don't want to go too much higher because the center part of the floor is supported, but I didn't count on this much weight on it. So if I make another one, it would support it much better, but it's still, the air still goes underneath. So inside, from the east side it comes down, and this is the pipe that fills up the rainwater tank. And this one, it comes from both sides. So inside of here is the rainwater And then there's a big float valve. I don't know if you can see it. Big float valve in there. So basically it stays cool down here and the ball stays on top, and you take the fresh water from on top, and you're looking at a little bit of dirt and silt that goes down to the bottom, that the fines come through. But they found over a period of time that that's actually beneficial to rainwater storage, is to keep that film inside of there. It creates its own like biological kind of a filter thing. This is the filter system for the rainwater system. We have 3 of the big blues, they call them, 20-inch filters. It's a, let's see, a 5 micron, 20 micron, a 5 micron, and then a carbon. So it goes through one at a time, and then it goes over the other side, and that's where we distribute it. You'll see the little hose connected to the pump. Basically, that hose is to take up any vibration to keep it quiet. Otherwise, it would vibrate the entire plumbing. So it's a way to keep it quiet. And then they have the pressure valves and an expansion tank. And then I can bypass if I want to change a filter. I'm doing tests with a sand filter. So they make these cartridges that are clear. You can actually fill them up with sand and use sand for these rather than disposables. So I'm working with that system as well. And you see the more braces. There's a brace about every 8 feet or so, keeping these walls apart. And this is the urine tube here. And these are 2 upright, these are 2 plenums that take air upstairs. So it comes from the underneath us, takes it right on up with those 2 fans. And we have just food storage here, and then cooking equipment and cooking and preservation equipment here. Those batteries you see is for my wind generation system. I haven't got it set up yet. I'm going to be putting them inside of the container and hooking up my wind. I'll get that in just a second. I'm right at the center of the home now. I just took a little walk from the rainwater system. I just happened to notice it's called SB190. If you want 2 adhesives that you want all the time, if you can only choose 2 adhesives, this is a polyurethane caulk. You can use it for adhesive. It's actually foam. And this is SB190. It is the greatest adhesive I've run across in years. It's just wonderful stuff. Over here we have one of the power systems. I'm having another one's over there. I have 2 battery banks. So I'm separately charging each one. So this is a controller, and then a junction box. The solar comes in, and solar comes in right into the controller, changes it to DC and charges up my battery bank. And then we got the new solar panel coming in, also doing the same thing. And this is a charger. So when the sun isn't shining for a long period of time and the wind is dying, you start the generator up, it's automatically connected to the charger, which then charges up and powers the house. This is a 10-2 wire. So anything not connected to 10-4, the big cord, usually I run this for all the smaller stuff, for the lights or systems of some sort. The future, I'm planning on changing this over so I can tell how much electricity is going through each one of these circuits. There's a little shunt and a little meter, so I'll be able to tell. I'm changing over my power system. So it's easier, for example, if a pump starts getting worn out, starts drawing too much power, you wouldn't know it unless you have one of these on a circuit. This is a 12-volt freezer, and an existing 12-volt freezer that's occupied. So 12-volt freezer is by unique. It doesn't draw too much. You have to really search to find them. They call them solar freezers sometimes, solar refrigerator freezers. But they're very efficient, and I've been running one for quite some time now. This is the well pump over here, and it still uses the C-flow pump. And then, see, I've wrapped this one with insulation because this is the one I run when I pump the cold water out through the duct radiator and then into the storage tank. So I try to keep it as cold as possible going out so I can keep that duct room as cold as possible. Expansion tank again. Here we have the stairway coming down from up there. Again, you can close it up and seal it up completely. This is our freezer. This is what keeps our food, keeps the food cold. We have ice and stuff and pizza, normal stuff. But we keep it down here. It stays a little cooler, but it's been working very good. It looks like it needs defrosting. That's why I got the other one setting here. We're going to defrost it one of these days. Okay, this is our drinking water. Now from the rainwater, from filtered rainwater for all our washing and showering, it comes over to this plenum. And then we split off, and I have two of these guys. These are Dalton. They basically look like this inside. It has 5 of the little filters, like those candle filters they call them, inside. And the drawback is this, it takes a little pressure drop going through. So that's why I put twin, so I can actually keep the pressure on. And I use an expansion tank on the other side. So it's a way to keep the pressure, and you can almost free flow it, which means I can take rainwater, filtered rainwater, filter it enough for drinking water, and just pipe it right on up, just like a normal house. Okay, this is my other battery bank, very similar to the first one. We're running a generator now because of the lights and whatnot, or because of the cameras. This is very similar to what I got in the duck room. I can channel air through this radiator before I go to the duck room if I need supplemental cooling inside the bedroom. So this goes up into the bedroom should I need supplemental cooling. This is a inverter, fairly good sized inverter, 1500 watts. This will eventually be used to power the wash machine, which we didn't see. It's a Staber wash machine that's right up in an entryway. Staber is a little unique kind of a wash machine. It does it a little different. It's one of the lowest water use machines available anywhere in the world. And so this is going to power that and then come down. Now, I'll go over the three different plumbing systems I have here. First of all, the urine. That's this long tube angling over there. The urine comes right down through here, through the urinals in the, that goes up to upstairs to the urinals, and this goes to the urinal over there in the bathroom. So I got bathroom, 2 urinals in the bathroom, 2 urinals upstairs, all coming down through this tube over the urinal. So that's the urine part of it. Now, the second part is black water. Feces, human feces, flush toilet. This one connects directly up with the toilet right above us. And it's completely waterless. You just spray it. It uses just a fraction of the water of a regular toilet. Comes right down here. Sometimes it'll build up right here. I kind of monitor with this clear tube to find out if it's blocked or not. And then the other one comes down there too. So the 2 toilets come down these pipes. It's vented over here. Now the beauty of this system is that if I didn't use any water to flush it, it would probably clog up. So what I do is I take one of the kitchen sinks, it comes right down here, and when you wash dishes, it actually flushes my toilet. So the toilet flush depends on washing dishes, which is usually common in both houses anyway. If it doesn't, you just dump a little water down the kitchen sink and it'll flush the toilet. This eliminates having to recycle water and put it in the tank behind you to try to recycle water. So you're actually doing it, you're not smelling it, it just happens. So the black water flushes down here, clean out tube, goes right out to the holding tank. And we'll get to that in a minute. Then the third system is a gray water system. That's right here. This is the gray water. So from the kitchen sink, that's the utility room sink. I forgot to mention that's in there with the HRV, with the heat recovery ventilator. Comes down here, joins with the gray water system from the bathroom, and then it all goes, and that's another gray water there, and it joins up over there and goes down to the gray water system, and that's a clean out tube. And there's another pipe you haven't seen that actually goes up to the wash machine. So the wash machine, sinks, shower, all go gray water and out. And there's another HIPPO valve here. You don't have to use the U-tube with the freezing. Use a HIPPO valve right here. So they're all marked going down. So that's the water system. We'll get in there in just a second. So we're at the very end of the living space now, underneath the living space. This is the wind generator systems. So I'm switching over. You can see the cords coming in. The big heavy cords are my old 12-volt system. Now I'm changing to the 3-phase. They have to be rectified. So it's pretty simple to do. There's just three-phase comes in, and it goes out DC. Then you can use it wherever. The problem with wind generators it's unique to wind generators. Solar can be controlled by simply throwing a switch, and the solar panel will stop working. Wind generator is much more difficult, so you have to what's called shunt it. So you have to have something to take that power to shunt the power. So for example, the wind is still blowing, your batteries are full, we're in a problem. So a little regulator will say, your batteries are full, throw a switch. And it can go either to a heating element, a water heating element, or I have heating elements underneath my holding tank. I can heat that up in the wintertime. So I have various places where I can shunt electricity. It's a drawback to wind generators in general, but the high-tech ones, the real expensive ones, they've overcome that in a lot of different ways. This is my filter systems, my filters. This is one of those sock filters that we had inside of the rainwater systems. It just goes right on top. Rainwater goes in and filters it in, and then you can wash these and recycle them. And this is an example of the filters for the 20-inch Big Blue. I've got one around here that has clear that you can put sand in and experiment with, but I don't see it right now. Okay, that's filtered. This is what those silver impregnated ceramic filters look like. They just screw in and the water goes through and then out through the bottom. So this is my filter systems. That is called calcium chloride. That's actually ice melt. For a while I was doing experimentation with dehumidification using this ice melt. So you take small chunks of that, put them in this little container, and they actually collect moisture and they drip into the bucket. And so they take water out of the air, turn it into solution, put it in the bucket. They work amazingly well, but there's two drawbacks with it so far that I've run into. Number one is that it makes a little too much heat. So actually the chemical reaction makes a little too much heat, and recycling it is tough. So I've tried solar collectors to recycle it, and I can't build up enough heat yet to recycle it. But if I get a solar collector that can put enough heat on it, it can drive the moisture out, and it can be reused over and over again. So there's still a lot of work to be done. There's people working on it, but it's not a priority at this point. Okay, we're going to move into the north end right now. We're inside the north chiller right now. Directly above us is the screened-in porch that you've seen earlier. And this is protected by more soil around it, so it stays more stable. We're going to use this for common storage, which means just take a squash and put it on the shelf and just wait. We had a squash last until May this year. It's incredible. We found out that changing the temperature really detracts from the storage on vegetables and fruits. It's better to maintain a completely stable temperature. So I might put another entry on here, a double entry like they do in clean rooms and low humidity rooms, so that it doesn't upset the temperature inside of here. So we'll make little rooms. That's what that freezer is for. We're going to make common storage for that. That's a freezer that doesn't work, and we got it on the shelves, and various storage area. This tube over here on my left is actually the gray water system coming on down and then going straight out to the vents and to the gray water system we saw earlier. And there's a clean out port in that. It's all supported and insulated, so I don't want ice forming in that. This is the holding tank. This is the black water holding tank. Black water falls in through here. There's a little clean out port here, but it stays all sealed. The vent keeps it under negative pressure. There's a vent outside, and there's actually a powered vent there that keeps it all under negative pressure. And then this is the clean out tube. It goes outside, and you might have seen that out there before. So it has the option to be pumped out separately as well. So he can come in with a 3-inch suction hose, go right down to the bottom and suck it out. In about 2 minutes, it's all dry. Right now, I've got it about up to here. I'm only taking it up maybe a third of the way for the same reason as the rainwater tube. I don't want to stress the floor because I don't remember exactly how I braced this. So I have it pumped out before it's even a third full. Comes in, pumps it out, boom, 2 minutes, he's gone. And then I try to insulate it so that it doesn't freeze. It never did. This room got down below freezing on a couple of occasions, but I just opened the door here and it got warmed up again. So there is a layer of insulation underneath this chipboard. There's a layer of 3/4 inch foam and then another layer of plywood underneath it. So it's kind of a sandwich. And it operates in the same way as everything down here. There's actually an airspace underneath. The fan you hear in the background is blowing air directly off the ceiling. So I take it up on top of the loft. There's a plenum going down, and then the fan brings it in here. This is a little warmer. It usually stays about, on a warm day, talking about 73, 75 degrees. It can get as high as 78, blowing into this room, and then kind of pressurizes this room. And then again, the air goes into these holes down and then comes out that way. So it's a way we use the underfloor as well. So it's a way to have a little more coolness in this room than the other rooms because it's connected with the ground a little bit more, because we're looking at probably, maybe the soil's right up about here somewhere. But again, that can be adjusted. I always put more in it if I want to. But again, it's insulated on top and insulated on the sides, so it uses the coolness of the ground. Oh, the vents connecting the outside with this side, when I flush it out, eventually they're going to be used. We're going to use little 12-volt actuators. What an actuator is, you put 12-volt electricity to it, it moves the lever in and out, so I can actually move those vents, open and close the vents, just by touching a button or microprocessor controlled. So that's the next generation, is to try and automate this environmental control as much as possible. It's just busy work. It's not rocket science. Home automation is real common. People buy it, but it's all 110 volts. And factory automation is fine. I use a lot of air to open dampers and stuff. And if I need it, I can use air because I have an air compressor. But for now, that's the next step, is just to open and close dampers. And then the house is, if a microprocessor controls this whole thing, it might actually sense when the humidity's down, if you need humidity, if you need heat. It can actually do this all automatically. It doesn't require manual assistance. So eventually that's where it's going. We're still in the north chiller, and this is the power input to the earth home. I took a 4-inch pipe and ran it under the soil out, and that's where all the tubes come in. These are my 2 solar collectors, positive, negative, coming in at a higher voltage again. And this is my 12-volt wind generator coming in, but it's heavy cord. And this is my other wind generator coming in 3-phase. And this is my air pumper coming in. So it's a way to bring everything in without having to mount solar panels on the roof. It's mounting on the roof is okay, but it catches snow, and anytime you breach the roof, you run into problems later on, especially in the Minnesota climate, freezing, thawing. So it's a way to keep the solar panels out. It's really not necessary to put them on the roof. They got a pretty good view out there. And because we're coming in with higher voltage, we can go quite a distance with these tubes. So I can actually thread it through with a fish tape, go in and pull in if I want to add solar panels or add wind generator. It's a way to add them without having to run a separate wires all over. So what you've seen here today is a very in-depth glimpse of the Earth Home system and what the plans are going forward. I wanted to try to communicate to the next person much younger than me that has an interest in this type of structure and living lifestyle. It'd be great if someone could pick up on this video and start building at that point, having to disregard and trash all the 3/4 or the 90% of all the mistakes I've made, pick up on the 10% of the good stuff and go from there. It'll save so much time. What I've said today was what I think people should know if they're going to duplicate this or mass produce it in the future. I really believe that mass producing these things all over the world will be a big benefit to the planet Earth. I don't think the world really wants this right now, but I think it so desperately needs it. I would like this to continue after I'm gone. I'm 71 years old right now. I can start feeling my bones and body start feeling the stress. Yes, I do have an expiration date. They say life is a trap; no one gets out alive. Well, I would like it to continue afterwards. To that end, I placed ads. I sold a piece of land and got some money, so I bought ads in the Wall Street Journal on both coasts and the USA Today magazine, hoping for a benefactor, a philanthropist, an investor, someone who could take this on after I'm gone. What I'd like to see happen is uh, a group of people take it on, document, and then move it forward in terms of breaking up all these little experiments over other people. And then especially the automation part, trying to continuous and build another prototype and another prototype and another prototype. It may have to be done in a foreign country. There are probably many items on here that are not yet approved by code. So I might be out front, but a lot of it's proven technology. I'm an engineer myself, mechanical engineer, industrial engineer, manufacturing engineer. So it's not based on whim. There's some certain facts to how things are built and why they're built that way, why they're built strong. I feel this structure is built stronger than any other structure, but it may not be legal in some states and some areas. So it may have to go offshore. So what I'm hoping is that someone who sees this picks up on it and it could inspire them to continue. Thank you.